the strategic trends which are likely to be seen in the South Asian region in the month of November. We all know that the month of November is going to be a very exciting period due to various reasons. First, of course, is the United States presidential elections, which is being held today, that is 3rd November. The outcome of this will determine the course of strategic engagement by countries across the region from India down to Bhutan, Maldives, and Sri Lanka. Then, of course, the trajectory of COVID-19 continues to be uncertain in the region. India has seen a dramatic drop, but other countries are seeing a rise, such as Sri Lanka. And the reactions which are happening to the French cartoon row in the region is leading to a lot of concerns as the debate over religious and free speech is going to engage a lot of us in the coming month. First, let's see what's the likely trends in India. The India-China standoff, which is continuing in eastern Ladakh, is expected to go into a decisive phase during the 8th Senior Commanders Conference that is likely to be held anytime in the next 1 week. With the winter fast approaching, it will be the interest of both sides to disengage and de-escalate from the forward positions, many of which are above 4,500 to 5,000 meters. It is virtually very difficult to survive on these heights. Nevertheless, none is going to give up the rights to territorial sovereignty. So how the impasse is resolved remains to be seen. On the COVID-19 front, we will have the Indian decline in number of cases as well as fatalities, a welcome move, but there are concerns as the festival season is on us and the winter is also fast approaching. These two factors will determine whether the flattening of the curve in India will stabilize or it is going to be a phenomena for the present. We have on the economic front, the rising growth is expected given the consumer spending which is going to happen during the month due to the festivals. And of course, the polls in Bihar as well as some by-polls in 10 other states which have happened, the results will be out on 10th of November. This will very certainly provide us a view perspective of how the COVID-19 has impacted various internal factors in the country. In Kashmir, we see a new development. Firstly, there is the People's Action Against or Gupkar Declaration, which has been formed by the mainstream parties in the valley who want restoration of Article 370 amongst other issues of special status. At the same time, we have the government announcing that non-residents can purchase non-agricultural land in the state. A reaction to that within Jammu and Kashmir has been of resentment. How this is quelled remains to be seen. And of course, on the international relations sphere, India's partnership with the United States is unlikely to be impacted by whosoever goes on to occupy the White House post-presidential elections. Nevertheless, there will be certain change in the trajectory of engagement with the US, which will have to be watched for. Let's move on to Afghanistan. Two trends are likely to define Afghanistan. One is, of course, continuing violence. Will it reduce? Will there be a ceasefire? Will there be a reduction in violence agreed to by the Taliban? Remains to be seen. At the same time, the intra-Afghan talks are really not moving forward as agenda setting continues to be a challenge. In Pakistan, the Pakistan Democratic Movement, which made a huge splash in the month of October, is expected to sustain the momentum in the month of November as well. There is rising dissent between the PDM opposition parties and the ruling Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf government. The army has willy-nilly been dragged into the controversy, and how things shape up in Pakistan now remain to be seen. At the same time, we have the rising trend of violence with a number of terrorist actions seen in the month of October, these are likely to prevail in November as well. Coming on to Nepal, a political crisis awaits Nepal in November as the resolution of differences between the top hierarchy of the Nepal Communist Party, Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli and co-chair Prachanda or Pushpa Kamal Dahal, has not been resolved as it was thought in the previous months. In fact, there are concerns that the NCP may go in for a soft split. How it impacts the parliamentary majority and whether there is a fall in the government in Nepal remains to be seen. Curiously, the visit of India's raw chief to Nepal was very publicly publicized in the country, and what implication it has on the political as well as the Nepal-China relations and Nepal-India relations remains to be seen. Bhutan has been able to control COVID-19, and now the focus is on economy, because the economic growth is certainly going down due to lack of interaction with the external actors in the region per se. In Myanmar, you have a defining election happening on 8th of November, with the National League of Democracy led by Aung San Suu Kyi be able to maintain the huge lead it gained in 2015, or will the opposition be able to wrestle more seats in the parliament? Both houses in Myanmar remains to be seen. Suffice to say, the NLD will emerge as the largest party. That is as far as indications go today. Coming down to Bangladesh, Bangladesh is expecting a second wave of COVID-19 with the winter chill likely to set in. How the government is able to contain it remains to be seen. Myanmar-Bangladesh relations are another factor which have to be kept in under due watch in the coming month. Even tensions which are arising after the Rohingya repatriation has been delayed for the last 2 years, and new factor as Myanmar accusing Bangladesh of harboring terrorists in the camps of the Rohingya refugees, creating dissension. Let's go down further to the south to the Indian Ocean, and we have Sri Lanka, where in October the ruling SLPP under President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and elder brother Mahinda Rajapaksa's leadership succeeded in pushing through the 20th constitutional amendment. This will fundamentally alter the executive powers in the country with a strong president and a weak parliament. Will it lead to certain political as well as economic advantages in terms of improving the governance remains to be seen. The immediate crisis, of course, is COVID-19, which the country has seen a spike in a second wave, and containing it is taking a lot of effort from the entire national leadership, which is the COVID-19 fight in Sri Lanka is led by the Sri Lankan army. Let's move down further south in Maldives, which saw a defining visit of the US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. How it impacts the relations between Maldives and China and Maldives and India remains to be seen. The country has seen the first few green shoots of tourism growth, which is very important for the economy of Maldives, which is heavily debt-ridden. If tourist growth, which comes in the winters, which is the tourist season in the atoll nation, it will be a good omen for Maldives. So let us see what the future holds in this regard. All said and done, November is going to be a month to watch for in South Asia, with the three large trends which are already identified: US presidential elections, COVID-19, and the reaction to the French cartoon row. Thank you very much for listening.